A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
Let's talk about the federal election campaign. It is all roaring to life, with not only the major parties but also the minor parties jostling for your attention. Now, throughout the campaign, we will be interested in what Christian parties and candidates are putting forward as policy that contrasts with the policies of the major parties. So issues like freedom of speech and religious freedom will be high on the priority list for discussion, keeping listeners informed of developments. Concerns like the potential for the demise of Christian schooling, under a likely scenario that Labor is forced to share power with the Greens. On the coalition side, there's perceived weaknesses around a whole bunch of issues too, religious freedom being one of them, and a non-commitment on issues to do with sexuality and gender. Well, Christians are more likely than ever to want to know what parties and what policies they're voting for. So let's get some insight from two special guests. Lyle Shelton leads the Family First Party in Australia. He's the lead Senate candidate for New South Wales for Family First. It's a party that has Christian values at its core. Also, Bernie Finn is joining us. You might recall Bernie was expelled from the Victorian Liberal Party in 2022 for his pro-life views. Now he's the lead Senate candidate for Victoria with Family First. And Family First standing more than 100 candidates nationally. Let's welcome our two guests. A special welcome back to you, Lyle Shelton.
Thanks very much, Neil. It's great to be with you.
And Bernie Finn, I might say a special welcome along to you.
Thank you, Neil. It's great to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Come to you first, Lyle Shelton. New news poll out today, strengthening the likelihood, I think, that Labor is likely to be returned, perhaps in a power-sharing deal with the Greens and the Teals. What are your thoughts on where things are heading, so far as polls and so far as the way of the mood of the community?
Yeah, I'm not surprised to see those polls come out over the weekend, Neil, although I'd hasten to add that there's still the best part of 5 weeks to go in this campaign. A week is a long time in politics. 5 weeks is an eternity. But I think the polls are reflecting the general lacklustre offering of the two major parties. Both are outdoing themselves to be small targets, and neither are addressing the fundamental issues that are facing this nation now: out of control $1 trillion debt, the gender issues that's really afflicting our children and young people, and of course the religious freedom and freedom of speech issues that you mentioned at the start. None of these fundamental issues are being tackled by both of the parties, and I think the polls simply reflect people's disinterest in what is a very lacklustre campaign and a lacklustre offering by the two major parties.
Let me bring you in here, Bernie Finn, because, you know, as Lyle says, this is a very important election that's coming. I've just gotten off the phone from doing an update, as I do on a Monday, with the Australian Christian Lobby, and I was talking to Michelle Pearce, and she was saying if values are not front and centre in this election campaign, that's a little bit like being gaslit, this gaslighting that can happen in politics, and it's almost as though the Australian people are left in the dark around values issues. What are your thoughts around just the way things have begun to shape at this time?
Well, Neil, you're absolutely right. I think that the people of Australia are starting to feel like they have no choice, that they see two parties that have let them down very, very badly in the past. One is letting them down continuing to this point, and they feel like they've got nowhere to go. They're really getting frustrated. They're really getting annoyed, and you know the prospect of a Labor Greens government is just horrendous. I think if we have we wake up in 5 weeks' time and Adam Bant is Deputy Prime Minister of Australia, this nation is gone for all money. I mean, we are in more strife than the early settlers.
Lyle Shelton, we've spoken about this sort of thing before, about whether we think this is actually a very, very important election. And as Bernie puts that there, if Adam Bant is the Deputy Prime Minister beyond the election, yeah, well, some people might be very concerned about that. Your thoughts?
Absolutely. Look, Adam Bant won't hold that office, but he will in effect be the Deputy Prime Minister, as Bernie rightly says. He'll wield that much power in a Labor Greens minority government, and that is an absolutely frightening place to be in. Adam Bant is hostile to everything that normal mainstream Australians believe in, who just simply want to get ahead, want to prosper for their families, who want their kids to know that there's, two genders, boys and girls, and nothing else. Adam Band is the one who drives, abortion to birth policy. He's the one advocating for, an annihilation of the state of Israel and the Jewish people. I mean, the list goes on and on. They're not a party about trees and koalas. They're a party about completely deconstructing everything that is good and true and beautiful about Australia. And sadly, the Greens for the last 30 years have been the dog that's been wagging, or the tail that's been wagging the policy dog, to the point where now much of the Greens agenda is even accepted by the so-called modern Liberals. So it's a really dire strait. We lack leadership in this nation, and that's why Bernie and I, and I know you said 100, and we were hoping for close to 100 candidates. Looking like it's going to be a tad over 80 candidates Australia-wide, which we're still incredibly proud of and pleased about. But that's why we're in the fight, because we've got to provide a leadership alternative for this nation, and provide a voice for the issues which really matter, which are not being addressed by the major parties.
Bernie Finn, you're not afraid of a fight. You've been right in the midst of a whole lot of stuff over a long, long time now, and now you're putting your hand up for Family First. What are you anticipating? And in Victoria, maybe the fight's more desperate than in a whole lot of other states and territories around Australia. What sort of fight are you expecting over this coming time?
Well, Neil, I think it's going to be on for young and old. To be quite blunt, I think it will be a fight the likes of which we've not seen before. And when I get to Canberra, and should I say I don't want to go to Canberra, I have to go to Canberra. Canberra is the last place I want to be. It's a dreadful place in my view. But if that's what I have to do to fight for the issues that are important, then that's what I'll do. But what we have in this country at the moment is we are at a fork in the road. And if we take the wrong road, we will not come back. And that is the truth of the matter. It's a scary time for us all. I remember, I'm old enough, unfortunately, to remember the election in 1975. Was my first, or no, second federal election that I was involved in. And I was thinking at that time that this is the biggest election we will ever see in our lives. Well, I have to say this one actually outshines it, because the importance of this election will decide the future of Australia, or indeed it will decide if Australia has a future. And with somebody like me who has a young family, that is pretty scary stuff. And I just urge everyone to get involved, to do the right thing, and to make sure that we do not have, the Labor Greens alternative, or the Libs aren't real flash either. It has to be said, but certainly they're better than the Labor Greens coalition that we may well have running the country for the next 3 years.
Lyle Shelton, what I can hear Bernie saying is when one of the major parties forms government after the election, it's really like the best of a bad bunch. And the best of a bad bunch can be kept honest, no doubt, if there are some voices in the parliament that we might hope have a level of Christian biblical foundation to them. Christian voices. Sometimes we feel like they are ignored, or they are drowned out, or people are not interested in hearing a Christian perspective on these things. How are you seeing the Christian voice in the lead up to this election?
Look, I think it's really important. Family First is a party that unashamedly promotes the Judeo-Christian ethic. If you want to be part of Family First, you need to subscribe to that ethic, which is the ethic which built Australia and built the West. So we're unashamed of that, and we believe we need a voice in the Senate, which is why Bernie and I and three other high-quality Senate candidates are running for Family First to promote that ethic. I mean, the Judeo-Christian ethic says that there is men and women, that we are created in the image of God, male and female. You've got two major parties running at this election, both saying that they will not amend the Sex Discrimination Act to restore the definition of woman in law in this nation. That's two parties that are running, Peter Dutton leading the Liberals and the Nationals, and Anthony Albanese leading Labor, saying that women can have a penis. I mean, that is just ridiculous. It defies logic. It defies a Christian view of male and femaleness. It defies a scientific view. You've also got both sides of politics supporting abortion to birth and its funding by Medicare, which is a federal issue. It's the federal government that funds abortion. Peter Dutton has told his candidates, every candidate in the coalition and every politician in the coalition has been told to say nothing about the issue of abortion to birth, to say nothing about this issue of babies being born alive and left to die. We've got to die straight in terms of Christian values and scientific values which normal mainstream people hold dear, because the major parties are hostile to them, both Liberal and Labor. That's why Bernie and myself and three other quality Senate candidates and up to 80 House of Reps candidates are putting their hands up across Eastern and Southern Australia to represent Family First at this election.
Let's talk about likely prospects. So I'll stay with you for a moment here, Lyle Shelton. 5 Senate candidates, as you say, 80 lower house candidates across the nation, and a big representation in there. We might be looking for some sort of insight into the prospects that Family First has. It's been a long journey since the reformation of Family First, and you've fought a number of state elections over these recent years. Here we are at a federal election. You've got quality candidates in the Senate positions, and you've got 80 candidates, and they're probably all quality candidates too, I might say. But what are your likely prospects?
Neil, it is tough for us, but it's not impossible. We, as you say, we've contested a number of state elections in the last 2 or 3 years since Family First Mark II came into being after having been closed down for a number of years. In the Victorian election in 2022, we polled over 3% of the statewide vote. We eclipsed all the other minor parties in that vote. Similarly, in South Australia that same year, similar sort of results. In Queensland, as you recall, Neil, last year we ran 59 candidates. In 16 electorates, we polled over 4% of the vote. Down in Victoria, just a few weeks ago, we contested the Werribee by-election in Labor Heartland, achieved 4.3% of the vote. These are very credible figures for a fairly new or reformed minor party that's still in its startup phase. If we can turn that 3-4% into 4, 5, 6%, we are knocking on the door of Senate seats. Now, that's going to be a tough ask, and I don't want to create false expectations, but Bernie and I and our other candidates are giving it a red-hot go. If we can staff every polling booth, say in the state of Victoria, we could very much expect that Bernie would get elected. Now, it's a big ask. Bernie's on the road. I know he's on the road tonight, Narre Warren in southeast Melbourne. If we can get the volunteer army out, and if we can continue to raise the really good money that we're raising at the moment, but we need a lot, we are certainly going to be knocking on the door. So we're giving it a red-hot go, Neil. I don't want to create unrealistic expectations, but if we don't fight, if we don't put these values on the ballot paper, who will? And we have to start somewhere. And if it's not this time, I know that it'll be in years to come, in the not too distant future, that we will be achieving parliamentary representation, God willing, if we stay the course.
Lyle, is it heartening for you that in Western Australia, Marika Grandwald has won a state-level upper house seat in the WA Parliament? They'd been chipping away year upon year, just putting their best foot forward, and finally some success, an election to the Western Australian upper house. Is this the sort of thing that you can see coming for Family First?
Yeah, absolutely, Neil. And I really congratulate Marika. She's been a friend for many years, and I've watched her work hard, her and her team there. The Western Australian Parliament, different situation. That the quota is very low there. It's a small state, a lot of seats. So they only needed around about 2% to achieve representation. They've exceeded that, done really, really well. I think Family First has the potential to do even better than Australian Christians. And we're not ashamed of being called Christians, if that's what people want to call us. But our brand goes wider than just the Christian base. As important as the Christian base is, there's a lot of people in mainstream Australia who believe what we believe, who aren't necessarily Christian people, who will be attracted to our brand. So I think we've got even greater potential going forward, and I think that's the strength of the Family First name and what we stand for.
And I think there's going to be an awful lot of listeners who have that level of maturity that says if you're going to have a party, a political party, you can't be just talking to Christians. You have to be broadly across a whole lot of different levels where people are going to say, well, those are common sense policies. You call yourself a Christian, you call yourself family first. I'm going to be able to stand with you on those. Hey, let's hearken back to last week's budget, because it was a little bit like last week's budget. When the Treasurer delivered his budget, it was a little bit like a campaign starter. And then, of course, Peter Dutton, it was like a campaign starter too for the Liberal National Coalition. Of course, that got drowned out a little bit because of the calling of the election last Friday. But let me come to you, Bernie. What comes to mind for you? Last week's budget and budget reply. I'm just saying, I noted that there wasn't much talk about values at all. It was a lot around economy, and those things are important, certainly as well. But what are your impressions, Bernie?
Well, the reason that there's no talk about values is because the government doesn't have any. That's the bottom line, and unfortunately, nor does the opposition. That's the bottom. Again, the bottom line. We're faced with 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, and that's a very sad state of affairs. A lot of notice and attention has been put on the 70 cents a day tax cut, which of course has been proclaimed by the Treasurer as a new era of prosperity. Now, I don't know where he's living, but I tell you what, not too many people where I am could live on 70 cents a day and say that they are having a new era of prosperity. It's just absolutely ridiculous. But the other thing that people should be aware of is that there was a boost to childcare. Now, childcare obviously is a very important issue, but what we want, what Family First wants, is to see not just childcare centres get that money, but mums and dads get that money so that they can stay home if they want. If they want, they can stay home and look after their own child. Now, that's a radical proposition. I know, mums and dads looking after their own children, but this is what we have to push. If we want choice, and they're great at talking about choice. If we want choice, then we should be giving mums the right to stay at home and look after and raise their own children. I mean, that's pretty basic, I think, and it would be great for individual families, and it would be great for society. We would have a lot less problems in this world if kids were at home being raised by their mums.
Lyle, Shelton, any other issues that come to mind for you as you reflect on last week's budget and the budget reply? What else is in mind that you have, that you gleaned?
I agree with everything Bernie's just said. I'd also add to that this is a budget of intergenerational theft. We're heading towards a $1 trillion budget. It's going to be our kids $1 trillion deficit. Both Liberal and Labor have just put our nation's finances on a perpetual credit card, which our kids and our grandkids will have to pay back. Also, this idea of giving us energy bill relief. The Albanese government and the coalition, through their net zero policies, have created an electricity price crisis, which has forced the price of everything up, because if you force the price of energy up by building windmills and solar panels, which don't work, you force the price of everything up. That's pushed our inflation through the roof. That's what caused the cost of living crisis. And the idea that then you'll borrow more money to give us $150 off our electricity bills, it's just an insult. It's not economic reform, and it's kicking the can down the road, and we are in for a massive financial crunch, which our kids are going to have to pay for. And the despairing thing, Neil, is that neither party are taking a policy to the election to address the structural problems in the budget. That's extremely alarming.
Bernie Finn, intergenerational theft. You say you've got a family. Lots of us have got family. We've got children. We've got grandchildren. We are interested in what's being passed on to the next generation. The idea of no major structural reform that's going to address that debt, what difference will it make if there's, one of you or Lyle or the other candidates in a Senate crossbench potentially? What sort of difference will it make to have that voice there?
Well, we're going to have a voice. That's what you have hit the nail on the head, Neil. We are going to have a voice. And that is really, really important because at the moment there is nobody in the Senate, nobody in the Parliament that is talking about the issues that we are talking about. There's nobody doing what we're doing. And it's really important that we go to Canberra and that we fight for the things that we do, to get up there and to hold them accountable. I'm not going to Canberra, as I say, because I want to. I'm going to Canberra because I have to. And I tell you what, I'm not going to go there to sit back and watch telly. I'm going up there to fight and fight hard, and I know Lyle's the same. And our other Senate candidates are all the same. We have a commitment, a real belief in what we are doing, and we are going to fight hard. If we go to Canberra, they're going to know we're in Canberra. Everybody will know we're in Canberra. And all I can say is to the whoever is in government after May the 3rd, if we're there as well, watch out, because we're coming.
It's almost news time. Lyle Shelton, I can think of various other parties like the Teals, and there are big billionaire backers that are actually behind some of these candidates. Is there anyone who's well-heeled sitting in behind Family First right now, or is it going to be a mums and dads rally to make all this happen?
Neil, it's a mums and dads rally. Bernie and I and our other candidates, we are being supported magnificently by thousands and thousands of little people, of people who, and I don't mean that in a disparaging way, these are just ordinary Australians who believe in our mission, and they're chipping in what they can, the widows' mites. Our biggest donors are probably, $10,000 or $20,000, which is not a lot for a major gifts program. So it's very much a grassroots funded campaign. And look, I have to say, Neil, we are just thrilled with the response we're getting. Obviously, we need more, but we've been blessed with enough to run a credible campaign. The more money we can raise, the better campaign we can raise. But we certainly can't match it with the Simon Holmes Accords, who's bankrolling the Teals. He's a billionaire. We can't match Clive Palmer with his hundreds of millions that he's throwing at this election. But we're very much a grassroots outfit.
Both parties committed to Medicare funding of abortion to and even after birth. Sometimes we think of this as a state issue, but actually there are federal issues involved here as well. What are your thoughts, Bernie?
Yeah, well, there's certainly it's a federal issue. I mean, the fact of the matter is that every state and territory in this country, we now have abortion until birth, legalised abortion until birth. A baby can be killed right up until the day that he or she would otherwise be born. It's just horrendous. And, of course, in Victoria and South Australia and Queensland, that we know of, maybe it's happening in other places as well, we have a situation where we can have what is called a failed abortion, which is just a sickening term in my view, where the doctor's view, and I use that term very loosely, doctor, the doctor's view is that the baby should be, the idea of the exercise was to kill the baby, and the baby's born alive, so we kill that little baby after he or she is born, and leave that little baby to one side and let he or she cry himself to death. I mean, it's just horrendous, and of course that is on a national scale. I mean, can we really call ourselves a civilised nation anymore? I don't think we can. It's just appalling. And particularly when you consider that we, the taxpayers, are paying for this. It's coming through Medicare. It has been paid for by Medicare, by the taxpayer for decades. And that's got to change. And that's certainly something that I'll be bringing to the Senate. And I know Lyle will, if and when we are there after May the 3rd, or after June the 30th. These are issues that have been ignored for far too long, and we're not going to let that happen any further.
Lyle Shelton, the difference between a civilised nation and an uncivilised nation, it comes down to values. How do you describe things? I mean, so many listeners are aware of the journey that you've been on for way, way, way more than a decade. Civilisation here is at risk if values are not chosen in the right ways. What are your thoughts here about the difference?
Yeah, we are very much at a civilisational moment, to borrow the phrase that the great Christian philosopher Os Guinness has coined, and which he's popularised through former Deputy Prime Minister John Anderson's ARC conference, Alliance for Responsible Citizenship. They've held 2 conferences in London and one in Australia in the last couple of years. We are at a civilisational moment, and that's because we've abandoned civilised behaviour, and Bernie's explained that very well when it comes to human rights for the unborn. We've abandoned civilised behaviour when it comes to trying to manipulate children's gender by injecting them with puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones, and even engaging in mutilating surgery of young girls, removing their breasts so that they can appear as boys. This is happening in Australia on a fairly large scale right now. This is uncivilised behaviour. It's uncivilised that young men and young women can't afford to get married and to buy a house anymore because we've squandered the Australian dream of home ownership, which stops young people from marrying and forming a family. I could go on and on. This is a civilisational moment. We've had an education system that's teaching young people to hate our country, to hate our Western inheritance, our Judeo-Christian roots. All that has got to change. And this is why Bernie and myself and Katie Lush in Queensland, Elizabeth Kickett in the ACT, Christopher Brough here in South Australia, while we're putting our hands up to try and form the next Senate crossbench so we can fight to reverse these things and to reclaim our civilisation and to get our nation back on track.
Well, let's take a call or two from listeners. We've got David, who's in Hillary's in Perth. Hello, David. Welcome.
Hello, welcome. Great job you guys are doing, by the way.
Thanks, David. What are your thoughts for our guests?
Well, the whole thing about the fabric of society and our foundations were built on Judeo-Christian values, the Ten Commandments. All the law systems were built on the Bible. And obviously the governments, Liberal and Labor, were so different in the past. Like, we would come from a Liberal family. They were Christian-based, a lot of Liberals. They've joined up like a uni party now. It's the same party, Labor and Liberal, not much difference anymore. But I think Christians are very ignorant. They don't realise who they're voting for or check out what they stand for, their values. And I think there's not enough information in the churches, the pastors. There needs to be more information in the churches, in the body of Christ, to say this is what you're voting for. And there's just not enough information.
Good thoughts there, David. Let's get a response here. Lyle Shelton, thoughts for David?
David's spot on. And look, I'm disappointed, like everyone, that perhaps our churches don't speak out enough about the political and cultural issues that are besetting the nation. I do think that's got to change. I say that very respectfully. I'm part of a local church, always have been. I love the local church. I'm not against them. But I do think we've got to find our voice again. And I do think, Abraham Kuyper, the great Dutch theologian and Prime Minister of Holland, was right when he said, as goes the church, so goes the nation. And I think part of the reason our nation is in the mess is because perhaps our church, and I include myself, I'm part of the church, we're in a bit of a mess and we're not speaking up. So that's got to change. And Bernie and I and our team hope to be part of the answer to that rather than complaining on the sidelines. We as part of God's people in this nation, we're trying to do our bit to raise a voice. And we hope more and more of our fellow Christians will, including the pastors and leaders.
David, I wish we could hear some more from you, but there's some more calls to take and a little bit limited time. Thank you so much for your call from Perth. Let's take another call. Chris is in Melbourne. Hey, Chris, welcome.
Yes, thank you, Neil. A civilised country is only determined by how you treat the most vulnerable. And if you don't treat the most vulnerable, and protect them, well, you're not civilised. And also, all these politicians, they want to save lives in every other area. I mean, they want to force you to take the vaccines, and they want the death penalty for the most heinous of criminals. Animals are protected, but babies don't seem to be. So it's the biggest load of hypocrisy. And also, just one thing, this is outside the square, but I say this to Lyle. Clive Palmer comes on telly every day, and God bless Australia. So if he loves God so much, tell him he'll be doing Australia a favour if he can get the family first over the line and ask him for a big donation.
That's good points you're making there, Chris. And let me just come back to Lyle Shelton here, and that's a really important point, isn't it? That Clive Palmer might say, God bless Australia. And Clive Palmer is not known to be a Christian, and some people might say he's very far from Christian values, but he recognises that there are Christians who resonate with the sorts of things he is putting forward as policy. What are your thoughts here, for what Chris is reflecting on?
Yeah, look, I've never met Clive Palmer, but I know some people who are close to him, and I'm assured by them that he is a Christian, that he is a very sincere Catholic. He's got a chapel on one of his Gold Coast properties. He's pro-life. I went and heard Clive Palmer speak in Sydney last year. He gave a very good talk. I think his heart's in the right place. I think, sadly, if I could be so bold to say, I think Clive's problem is he's a billionaire, and billionaires are used to getting their way and perhaps don't always take advice. And whilst there's many of his platforms that Bernie and I would agree with, unfortunately, I think his strategy is ill-conceived, and I think he's going to spend another $100 million at this election and just simply fragment the vote, and I don't think he'll get anyone elected again this time either. It's a real shame, because his heart's in the right place, and I believe that money could be redeployed better to achieve a better result for politics in this nation. But it is what it is, and we're just determined at Family First. We're here for the long term. Clive's party won't exist after this election, but by God's grace, Family First will, and we're going to keep going.
Okay. Chris in Melbourne, thank you so much for your call. 1800 316 316. Let's take another call. Vince is in Brisbane. Hey, Vince. Welcome.
Hi, Neil. Hi, guys. Look, thank you so much for putting up a good fight for our great country. Look, a quick one. I want to let you know I'm halfway through reading a book by a Kiwi author now living in Florida, Trevor Loudon. He's written a book on Anthony Albanese called Comrade Prime Minister. Anthony Albanese's 40-year relationship with Australian communism. Let me tell you, he's going to be very, very amenable to a Labor government in a minority partnership with the Greens.
Let's get a comment on that, and I'll come back to you if we've got some time here, Vince. But Bernie, what are your thoughts for our listener today, Vince?
Well, Vince and Neil, we've got to remember that Albo, if I could refer to him as such a warm and friendly term, that Anthony Albanese is not a Labor man. He is a socialist left man. Just as Daniel Andrews was a socialist left man in Victoria, and now Jacinta Andrews. Sorry, I keep calling her Jacinta Andrews because she's just Daniel Andrews' love child, really. We are being run. The Labor Party has been run by the socialist left. This is not the Labor Party that we knew. It's not even the Labor Party that some people loved. These are hard left, communist-like people. You know, you look at Penny Wong. I mean, Penny Wong's been pouring money into terrorists in Gaza. I mean, this is just so un-Australian. It's not just un-Australian; it's anti-Australian. And what Vince is saying is absolutely spot on. They are extremely hard left, and they'll get on with the Greens very, very well. I've no doubt. The only time they'll have any conflict is when their egos fire up. And I would imagine that when you get Adam Band and Penny Wong and a few others in a room, there could be a bit of ego battle there going on.
Vince, come back to you. We're short of time. What else did you want to add?
Well, I think that was it. And the other thing, just how the focus too on having two parents working at home. That's very much a socialist Marxist idea, because that way, without a parent at home to raise the children, the government take over raising the children and indoctrinate the children more.
Okay.
Right?
Lyle Shelton, would you like?
Absolutely right, Vince. Absolutely right. What we have now, a situation where, you know, maybe just a few days after that baby is born, certainly after that baby is brought home, that baby is handed over to a childcare centre while mum goes back to work, and that child is raised by the childcare worker at the childcare centre. You know, you can't tell me that that's supporting families when you have that sort of situation going on. We need a situation, and Family First will fight for a situation where mums or dads can stay home and look after their own kids if they want to. I'm absolutely convinced that there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions of mums around Australia who would dearly love to be able to stay home and look after their kids if they could afford it.
Vince in Brisbane, thanks so much for your call. And time is run out. Lyle Shelton, when we talk Family First, some people will be saying, if I just put my one in the Family First on the ballot form, maybe I'm wasting my vote. Our preferential voting system actually allows us to think more broadly about parties other than the major parties. What's your encouragement for Christian listeners today to think carefully about how they use the preference system we have in our Australian voting?
Neil, the most powerful thing a Christian or a family values-minded voter can do is vote 1 for Family First and then 2 for whoever else is their second choice. If they want Peter Dutton to be Prime Minister, they can vote 2 for him. It's not a wasted vote. You will hear the Liberal Party say that a vote for a minor party is a wasted vote. That is a lie. It's actually, the truth is it's a more powerful vote. And we'll be making a recommendation on our how to vote cards for who we recommend to you, 1, 2, 3, 4. Eventually our preferences will end up with the Liberal Party. They're the least worst of 2 very bad choices that we have at this election, but it's certainly not a wasted vote, and you are in control of your preferences. But we really would like you to vote 1 Family First, because that sends a big message to the major parties that there are people out there who believe in what we believe. It will also help us with some electoral funding if we can get over 4%. We want to use that money for good and not see it go to the major parties to use for evil. So vote 1 Family First.
Okay. All right, well, we have run out of time. Lyle Shelton leads the Family First Party in Australia, and he's the lead Senate candidate for New South Wales for Family First. Our other guest this morning, Bernie Finn, who you might recall was expelled from the Victorian Liberal Party. He's not afraid to roll his sleeves up and even get into the fight in a big way. He's pro-life to the core and has been for longer than any of us can remember. But he's the lead Senate candidate for Victoria with Family First. There are some challenging situations, even a civilisational moment, as we've been talking about. 80 candidates for Family First standing in electorates around Australia, 5 candidates for Senate seats. You can get some more detail about Family First. Check their values. Run your eye across the candidates. familyfirstparty.org.au, familyfirstparty.org.au. To you, Bernie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Good on you, Neil. Thank you very much indeed.
And Lyle Shelton, thank you for joining us and updating us on where things are at so far as your view of the coming up, the election that's coming.
Thanks, Neil. Really appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.